and welcome to another episode of Talking TRM, the podcast. My name is Bex Deadman, also known as Travel Risk Bex, and this week I'm joined by a guest who I've met over the last sort of couple of years as I've been really getting more heavily involved in some of the standards work that I've been doing, both with BSI and with ISO. He was a convener of another working group, and just watching what has happened, I've talked about the work he's done quite a lot, but the standard that his group has produced came out just towards the end of last year. And we really wanted to take this opportunity to talk to him about the work that's been done, but also sort of the reasons why and the reasons behind it. So I've been very, very fortunate enough to see from one of the best conveners I've ever actually sort of seen in action, Joël. So when I saw you later last year, I learnt a lot, and I hope I can take some of what you do into anything I do in the future. So thank you for that. It's an absolute honour to have you here. So before I go on, let me hand over to you. And if I could ask the first question, who are you and what is it that you do?
Well, first, thank you, Bex, for having me today. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Joël Marier. I'm from the French part of Canada, and I have a career of more than 30 years of top management in youth mobility or youth travel or youth tourism. Whether it's for commercial organizations or not-for-profit charities, social enterprises involved in that space. And for the last decade or so, I've continued my career into becoming a coach and a consultant in the social innovation space. So I deal with all kinds of organizations or group of organizations that tackle social issues, and that got me to work a lot with special clienteles or vulnerable clienteles, and one of those being youths. And so over the years, I've dealt with organizations that in many parts of the world, and that got me into dealing with risk management, both at an organizational level or a community level, whether it's geographically local or even national or international. And so that's a little bit about me.
Thank you so much. I mean, a little bit about you in a nutshell. There's obviously an awful lot more to unpack. So it's been a really kind of varied career. How did you make the sort of step from what you've been doing to the world of standards? Could you talk to us a little bit about that? So to obviously then talk about the project that you've just completed.
Well, the 7 years ago, or just a bit more now, I came across a sad story in the newspaper. In Toronto, we had a tragedy when a school brought a bunch of teenagers to a canoe trip in Algonquin Provincial Park, just about 2-hour drive north of Toronto in Canada. Sadly, this group of 30 people, just about 15-ish years old, on average, one young man died on a canoe trip. And that should never have happened. The school board which oversees that high school, has good policies, and one specific, it's a 54-page document. You'd think that it covers just about everything. And it covers a lot, in fact. But one of the elements in that policy document was, if you bring your participants near or on water, all your participants must have passed their swimming test. That young man did not pass its swimming test. In fact, half of the group did not pass the swimming test. But yet, the trip went along despite this, and a tragedy occurred. I'm not saying that this will happen all the time, but of course, situation near or close water bodies is one of the top risk element to consider in travel risk management. So this really touched a chord for me because I'm aware because of my background in youth travel. I'm aware of similar situations occurring all the time. Sometimes they're just near miss, but many times they are also tragedies, and not just in in the wilderness. It can happen in all kinds of situations. So I felt that having worked in this field for so many years, and I felt I should try to make a difference. This should not happen. And so you mentioned that earlier in this conversation. It took me 7 years. I'm not, although I've managed organizations and had to deal with risk management, I was not familiar with the International Standardization Organization, ISO. I knew it. I had worked with some standards, but I had no idea that what I was about to embark on. I had a good knowledge of the field, and I wanted to make a difference. A colleague of mine told me, well, they're looking for opportunities to develop new standards for vulnerable clienteles. I said, hey, this could work for could be a solution for what I want to do. But it did take it took us 3 years to write the document, and I'll come back to that a little later. But first, I needed to learn more about ISO and to funnel its way through. I got involved in travel risk management. There was another standard. People told me, hey, Joël, there's a new standard being developed. You should hop on this train and learn more about all these concepts, the procedures to build a standard, an international standard. And so I had my crash course, 3 years working with another team as a participant, just to try to contribute and learn. And that was the travel risk management guidance for organization, a first standard devoted ISO standard devoted to travel risk management in the ISO sphere, and that was ISO 31030. And I learned quite a bit. I have to say, thank you for your kind words about my convenership work. I have to say, I learned quite a bit from and I'm very grateful. Kevin Myers was a convener for Work Group 7, and I learned a lot. And that was very useful. I thought that through this, I could possibly convince them to have a section devoted to youth travel, devoted to handling minors and whatnot. But it wasn't. We have a little annex, a couple of pages, but that's my goal was really a different beast altogether. And that's when we embarked on developing. After it took me 4 years to convince the ISO system, and all of this works in a consensus mode with, and it's an international organization. So you can imagine that I thought it would be easy, but no, this organization thinks differently, and we had to and so on and so on and so on in different parts of the world. It took us just after 2021 when we completed 31030. We had embarked at the tail end into crafting 31031, which is managing risk for youth and school trips. So we gathered just about 35 experts from almost 20 countries, and we gathered best practices. These experts come from different backgrounds. We're still in operations for a little bit more time. I'll talk to you a little more about that. But 35 experts coming from very different backgrounds. They're tour operators, they're teachers, the risk management specialists, security specialists, academia, lawyers, but all kinds of expertise. And we took two standards as our base for the infrastructure or the framework. One was it was ISO 31030 because as a trailblazer, this created a framework specifically for the travel industry or travel sector. But it's broad and we had specific needs. So we found also a standard, a British standard from the British Standard Institute, BSI. So the BS 8848, which is a standard devoted to but a national one, managing risk with overseas expeditions. And again, a lot of good knowledge there. Of course, very focused on outbound travel, whereas we wanted three dimensions for ours, both domestic travel and outbound travel. But of course, when we talk about domestic, it also brings in inbound travel. So from organizations sending people to different countries. So three dimensions. And we gathered these people, and all of this work needs to be done on a consensus base. So for a convener, that puts a lot of challenge. There's no 6 voted against and 30 voted for. We're on. We're all good. No. We had to convince all those 6 people, and so on. And of course, we wanted an international standard, not a standard for the developed countries, developed economies only. In fact, the developing economies are demanding this because they don't have, in most cases, the infrastructure, and there's a lot. And so, if a sad story happens and it goes to court and so on, they don't have the jurisprudence to deal with those situations. So we embarked on this, and the developed countries told me, Joël, if you develop the standard, that's fine. We'll help you. But don't come and modify our standards or our best practices or our policies or our regulations in certain countries. We have it all covered. Well, guess what? Nobody is perfect. And even the best countries have learned quite a bit in the last 3 years in developing. And the bonus for everybody is that we now have an infrastructure that will be helpful for everyone. Those who don't have policies or regulations can inspire themselves. Those who have, they can tweak theirs. And, most school trips or youth trips that imply third-party providers. And so if you send someone I'm from Canada, so I don't want to pick on other countries. Let's say you want to send people to the Canadian Rockies, a group from England, and you're not sure of the providers. So, but now you can refer them back to ISO 31031 and secure yourself that they will have the same understanding as you when it comes to safeguarding, when it comes to supervision, when it comes to preparedness for incident or crisis. All of those things are covered in the standard, and and now we're happy to have the tool, and we're now starting to implement, and I'll have some stories about that if we have time.
We definitely have time. Thank you so much. That was a huge sort of insight into the work that you've done. And I'm so grateful because I think it's really important that people hear this because there's a kind of standards a bit. We use the term a bit like Marmite here. You either love it or you hate it. That might not actually translate at all. So my apologies if it doesn't. But standards sort of sit and they cause there's always people are quite opinionated on them, and I don't necessarily think that those who are kind of on the receiving end of them, i.e., those that have to align with them or certify against them, understand necessarily the process that has happened in order for them to be created in the first place. You know, they take years. They, especially an ISO standard, because the whole point of it is that you're bringing in all of these different countries to get to consensusship, exactly as you just said, to ensure that everybody is in agreement with what is then being created, and they take a long time. So I just want to I really want to get into kind of what's happening with the standard now. I just want to kind of recap for everyone's purpose because it gets a bit confusing some of this stuff, and like you, I'm new to the ISO way of doing things. You know, as you know, I've been working there too, and we're working on a standard for travel service providers in the same area. I've always had a lot of interest in what you've been doing because it's that continuation of 31030, which you're right was groundbreaking. 31031, what it does beautifully is, but it's a whole other area under the scope to sort of be looked at, which is the youth and school trip piece, which also ties in the third parties, which then allows what we're doing, which is actually looking at certification for these third party providers. It's all following a little bit of a journey, which continues to have interest and continues to I think people are quite. I don't know your experience. I think there's been a lot of assumption that a lot of this stuff was in place. Now we've put the standards in place because I think going back to your story, right at the beginning of all of this, you know, you're the reason that this tragic accident happened, and I think this is happening a lot. Is that people have policies, they have processes, but something is going wrong somewhere in the middle of it all, i.e., there's not an audit happening, there's not a check, there's not a practice of some kind to make sure that all of this is happening. And this is what these standards try to bring to life, isn't it? We're not saying here's a tick list, go and have all of these processes and policies and you're covered. We're actually putting this idea of risk management into practice, which is actually it's continuous improvement, and you get that by practicing and ensuring that you've got these things in place. So the application to organizations is on one hand, and then with youth groups or youth as a subject heading, we have other things to consider, such as their vulnerabilities and safeguarding and etc. It's one of those things that I you think, oh, why wasn't there anything there before? You know.
You'll never have. Thank you, Bex. You'll never have a 100% safe trip. Never. There will be near misses that you need to learn from. There will be minor situations. Rarely do you have, when you consider that millions and millions and millions of young people travel every year in group settings. So we do have. I'm grateful. We do have a situation where those tragedies are a very small percentage of the overall turnover of young people in this activity. But when it happens, it is really, really sad, and it involves so many people. The reputation of the school, the post traumatic situation that the other participants have to deal with, legal issues, all kinds of situations, and that a lot of that can be avoided. And so by us gathering all these best practices, we've within an understood framework of risk management, we now have been able to provide a framework. I will use again that word for benchmarking your organization, may it be small or very big, with the best practices that we've gathered around the world. And I want to touch on this a little bit because, of course, for larger organizations, they have a designated staff. If you're a tour operator operating in several continents, you have senior staff, you have paid resources that you outsource from all kinds of areas. But you might be a small school, and your trips or a local a sports club, and you rely on volunteers, and you probably have some written documentation. What's the process? How to deal with risk? But just reading our document and benchmarking, you'll get a lot of ideas. And I was working with a small school board recently, and they said, "Well, where do we start, Joel? It's so big. We organize trips, even though if we're very small, we organize maybe a dozen trips every year." And with younger kids, older teenagers, different destinations. And we got to them to read the document, created a little committee. They read the document, and they've identified 10 issues. And they said, well, we need to really put some time, quality time, in solidifying our policies or our practices, because we have this policy. Your standard, Joel, helped us realize that this is why we have those 3 or 4 paragraphs on supervision, and yet we're not monitoring this appropriately. We're not training our volunteers appropriately, and so there's the benchmarking part is very important because they've identified just about 10 areas, and I told them, you should focus on the top 3, your top 3. Where do you think you'll get more bang for your buck, more return on your investment? Because you don't have the time to do everything. You'll never be a perfect organization. You're a perfectible organization. And so they identified that they wanted to review their roles and responsibilities within the organization. They wanted to review how they train volunteers for dynamic assessment, because you might have done all the perfect things in theory. Here are all the risks that we think we've identified for that trip, and how we're going to deal with them. But guess what? On the field, something happens. Climate change makes all kinds of new situations, and pandemic, by the way, or all those things. So dynamic assessment, how do you deal with this? And they had not covered that thoroughly. At least that's what they felt. And another one was safeguarding. Yes, they're in a school setting, so they have good policies, but it's a different beast when you bring people to a foreign country and for 3 weeks. So bullying, how do you deal with social media, and all kinds of things. So they picked those, and guess what? They've added a few paragraphs here and there. They've changed how they are managing the training of new volunteers, and how they source them out. And they've embarked. They've put their finger in the ringer, and they think that maybe next year they will evaluate based on our standard. They will evaluate their trips more thoroughly, and they might feel the need to continue to improve. So there's already benefits that we're seeing. The standard has been out for 3 months now, and I was on Google, and there was 51,000 results, a research result on Google talking about ISO 31031. So I think the word is getting out. And that's improving. Now, you were talking about certification. Our standard is a guidance standard. So at the end of the day, there's not an ISO certification that you can put on your marketing or on your website or on your in your letters to the parents or what have you. But you can certainly prepare for a certification down the road. Germany, this past at the end of this year, adopted nationally the standard. ISO, and that's very important because ISO works with three official languages: English, French, and Russian. But so Germany felt that there was a story recently. The national public broadcaster went undercover with a journalist and found out that summer camps are not as secure as they should be, both in Germany and abroad. And and that's why they wanted now to have it the standard available in the German language, and they also wanted to become certifiable. And so that's, of course, it's specific to 31031, but I know that you have been working on developing a certifiable standard based on 31030, and maybe that could help the German schools and youth groups. Would you not think?
100%. Well, and I think it's the missing piece, isn't it? Because what I think is great about both 30 and 31, and let's just get it out there again, these are both guidance standards. There's a lot of connotation around this, and people obviously talk about different things. These are both guidance standards, which means you can't get an official certification with an ISO logo to say that you've certified against it. The point of them is to, as Joel says, is to benchmark, and to get an understanding as to where your organisation is, whatever size you are, and to see what good practice looks like, and to kind of work out, well, actually, these things apply to us, these things don't, and kind of create your program around those. Um, the bit that is the sort of missing piece is this kind of bit that we call the travel service providers. And we don't just, when we talk about that, we're talking about accommodation, we're talking about airlines, but we're also talking about ground transport, we're talking about the agents that book this stuff, we're talking about the technology that supports it, and we're talking about the security and the assistance companies. So everything kind of being brought under one area. And we're talking about three or four huge industries kind of coming together, which some specialize in duty of care, some market duty of care, and are all at sort of different varying levels as to what that means. And we're not really thinking about it from the traveller, being that a younger member of our society or being that an adult. And none of us sort of know our responsibilities. So to gel all of these standards, it's potentially about getting the travel service providers to understand where their roles and responsibilities lie in this too. So for the last 2 years, while you've been doing, obviously finishing off the work that you've been doing, we've been putting together something which could be a certifiable standard. It could be a management system standard. And obviously you've been part of those groups as well, which I think then sort of ties in all of these things, but from the travel service providers' perspective. Now, there has always been talk about certification for 31O30, and of course, you've just said there's conversations around it for 31 too. It's a natural step that potentially we could go down that road. But I think what's important for everyone to remember listening to this is that standards are developed because there is an interest from the industries that they support that this is what they want. So we're not going to just develop certification standards for the sake of it. There has to be that sort of drive. And the drive up until now has been around travel service providers. Everybody is in agreement that this is a bit of a wild west out there, and people aren't 100% sure what they are buying into. So that's the way that the work is going at the moment, but always considering these two other standards, 31 and 30, and how we can move towards some sort of certification for those as well. So yes, that could well help the German market and what they're talking about. And obviously, we know Germany have always been actively involved in all of these standards at ISO level as well. So they're a big part of everything that we do. But it's really encouraging to see some of the, uh, I guess, more or less underdeveloped countries that are also now getting involved in all of this as well, which I find really exciting because tourism is always such a big piece of their GDP that actually bringing these standards in and understanding the role that they play in encouraging and optimizing travel inbound is a big piece as well. So yeah, lots of good things there. I am conscious of time, but I think we've had a lovely session because we've kind of rolled this all very organically. So we've talked about your passions and we've talked about your why, and we've even given some tips all the way through this, which is really important. But I do just want to give you an opportunity just to sort of say a final few things, really, is to sort of what potentially happens now, how can people kind of get involved in this, and what do we do to continue it forward, Joelle?
Well, we want to spread the word as much as possible. We're happy with the progress we've done so far. The WG9, our work group, is going to be terminating its mandate in just about 3 months, a little more, and we're putting our efforts now at promoting and implementing and trying to envision the future. The future will be to have it available in more languages, because there are so many subtleties with language and culture, and the location of those countries. I talked about German, but now I hear that Italian is also will also be available soon. The Italian Standard Association has put it, will be adopting it any day now, and it will be available. They will add an annex to their national standard. So they will adopt it nationally and add a section on how to deal with people living with an handicap. This capacity, and that's how it adapts to different markets, different realities. I've been in touch with a group of Latin American countries. They want it in Spanish. Now that might take a little bit more time, but it's in the works. We also need to think of different needs. What kind of tools can we put together? Is it a different guide to implement the standard? And of course, we look forward to your work on certification to see if it could, how we could integrate our organizations involved. So we want to stay in touch, the different countries, just about 20 countries. And when I say 20, that's from all continents. And So there will be some. Right now, we're using the website of ISO. ISO as a specific website for risk management, and so that's one way to keep in touch with what's happening. We're very active on LinkedIn as well. And of course, lots of those people involved are experts in consulting or helping organizations so that they will be promoting the standard and offering their services as well.
Thank you so much. I hope this has been really, really informative for everybody. So we wanted to get this out there, as soon as we possibly could after the standard being released. We're massive fans, not just on Talking TRM, but on the Travel Risk Academy, and actually all of the work that we do. And we really just want to get this out there. So just sort of summarising what Joel said there. To the working group that created this standard, WG9. We will be disbanded officially from ISO in the next few months because your work, in theory, has been done as far as the standard has been created. But it is still possible to get in touch with them via LinkedIn or via the website for the next few months at least. But everybody who has been involved in this, which is often the way with standards, are still extremely passionate about it and want to and are available to talk about it, to have conversations, to spread the word, to really just kind of do anything they need to do at a country, regional, and local level to push awareness of this standard out there. And remember, if you are wanting to look at this standard from a guidance and alignment perspective, very much like 31030, it has been written to meet you where you are and for you to sort of use it as a benchmark. It's not there to tell you what you should and shouldn't do. It's a collection of good practice for you to then align your practices and potentially improve them and be aware of what other people are doing. But ultimately, this is risk management. You make your own decisions. Remember, you write down what you do, and then you do what you say you do. That's the key to travel risk management. But it's about creating a body of work that really supports people on these journeys, keeping our people, and in this case our youth, as safe as possible, to allow them to have the experiences that they should have and to be able to enjoy safely all of the things that we've taken for granted. Joelle, thank you so much for your time. Have you enjoyed yourself?
Well, absolutely, absolutely, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
So, Joel, thank you so much for your time today. We've been listening to Joël Marier, the convener of Working Group 9, who created ISO 31031 Risk Management for School and Youth Trips. Thank you so much for tuning in as usual. We will be back in a couple of weeks' time with our next episode. And until then, please stay safe.